First, in January 2003, fires had been burning around the edges of the ACT and on the 18th burst into the suburbs with a violence few seemed to have anticipated. Chris Uhlmann's first ever television report was a half-hour documentary special we called Where There's Smoke. It went on to win several awards and is still used as source material for anyone interested in the anatomy of that day's events. Here's an abridged version and a timely reminder as we head towards the summer fire season.
On the afternoon of January the 8th, lightning strikes in the Brindabellas and Namadgi National Park start 4 fires, which directly led to the destruction in Canberra 10 days later. Many experienced firefighters believe that it was in those crucial early days that every available resource should have been thrown at the fires.
You just don't leave fires like that in the middle of January, in the middle of a drought, and let them burn.
And I will be saying to the inquiry that the initial delay was something that I find very difficult to understand.
On day 1 of the fire, Peter Smith, captain of the local fire brigade, rounded up his team and waited for the order from Queanbeyan to fight. He says that order never came.
Our crews responded to our fire station with the expectation of going and attempting to suppress the fires. At least there were 4 fires around us. And
did you suppress any of them?
No, we didn't.
Why not?
I guess you'll have to ask the incident management people that. They haven't told me, I don't know.
So basically you were there on standby. Yes. And no one sent you to fight the fire?
No, we were told to go home.
This emergency services map shows how the fires grew. Here, on day 1, there are several small fires, with the largest to the north at McIntyre's hut. There's little change by the next day. On day 3, and the McIntyre's hut fire to the top of the screen is growing, while the others remain much the same. There's little change again on day 4. On days 5 and 6, all the fires are growing, but slowly. Day 7 and the 2 fires to the bottom of the screen combine. On days 8 and 9, the situation remains fairly much the same. But by day 10, blown by northwesterly gusting up to 58 kilometres an hour, all fires break their containment lines and begin their run towards Canberra. And then this, at noon on day 11, January the 18th. And this is the firestorm late in the afternoon. So, in the week leading up to the 18th, does the Emergency Services Bureau have any sense of the threat facing Canberra? And, if it does, why isn't that communicated to the public? Certainly the New South Wales Rural Fire Service seems to have been aware of the danger.
This is probably the worst threat to this part of the state in many, many decades. The Brindabella complex of fires are certainly a potential threat to some very valuable asset, not the least being some mature pine forest on the border of Canberra, and indeed the ACT itself.
New South Wales Fire Chief Phil Koperberg arrived in Queanbeyan on the Wednesday before the fires hit Canberra. That afternoon he held a meeting with his ACT counterpart. Stateline has confirmed that at the meeting the ACT was warned of a massive exposure if the forecast dire weather conditions materialised. New South Wales made an open-ended offer of assistance. The ACT asked for just 4 task forces, that is 20 trucks and crews. These were in place by Friday and Saturday morning.
Given the fact that the weather is going to deteriorate again at the weekend, and possibly quite severely, the job is still ahead of them.
However, even 2 days later, that same sense of urgency was not being expressed at a local level.
How far are the fires from Canberra and what are the chances that it'll reach the edge?
Well, the fires are a fair way from Canberra. I haven't measured it in kilometres. They're a fair way away from the edge of the urban area of the ACT. Under a northwest wind conditions, the chances of reaching the urban edge is pretty slim.
You were saying yesterday that there was a minimal chance of the fires reaching suburban Canberra. Is that still your assessment, or have you re-evaluated your view?
Yeah, I think the word minimal is your word, but there has always been a chance that the fire would reach the urban area. I think that chance still exists, and it's certainly not out of our planning arrangements, but they're precautionary arrangements at this stage.
While the noon press conference is underway, alarm bells are ringing elsewhere in the city. At 12:20, the officer in charge of operations at police headquarters calls the Emergency Services Bureau and advises that a state of emergency needs to be declared. The advice is rejected. At 2:30, the emergency warning signal is sounded on ABC radio. A state of emergency is declared at 2:45, more than 2 hours after the first police request was made, and half an hour before the fires hit Duffy.
I have declared a state of emergency in the ACT. We are facing a very serious circumstance, particularly those suburbs facing the edge in Belconnen, those suburbs currently, all of the suburbs of Western Creek, and unfortunately we already have some houses alight.
The ACT and New South Wales radio systems are incompatible, which means interstate teams working together had to improvise. If all of Canberra's radio systems are channelled through the headquarters at Curtin, there just isn't enough bandwidth to deal with the load.
On the Friday night, by the end of the night, that is about midnight, the ACT radio system was virtually in tatters. As it was from about 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock on the Saturday morning, it was producing a whole series of static and very few messages.
So you think, from what you heard in your part of the fight, it would have been almost impossible for the ACT to properly manage its system on the day?
It was absolutely impossible, I can assure you of that, with that system.
Michael Blythe, though, was a volunteer working with the ACT Emergency Service, and he remains bitter that his team was not called on.
We advised the Emergency Services Bureau that we were here and that we had transport, and we stayed here until they stood us down late at night.
From further afield, some firefighting units from around New South Wales were trying to get to Canberra.
I arrived at Bateman's Bay at 15:55 and they hit the road at right on 1600. At 16:05 the task force received a radio message to say that they were to abort the mission, that they were no longer required.
In the days that followed, many questions surfaced, and many remain unanswered.
I think there's an enormous number of questions that need to be raised over January the 18th, but we're very encouraged by John Stanhope's assurances that the truth will come out.
It must happen, and if it doesn't happen, there'll be another disaster.